I need to repolish this table. Hi, hello. This is an odd time to start, right? 9:05 Central Standard Time. I wanted to make sure I got back in time. I didn't want to be rushing around. So I gave myself some leeway and then didn't need the leeway. But anyway, so let's pray. God, thank you so much for your love. Thank you for this time. I ask that you please open our ears to hear anything that you would like for us to receive from this reading. If there is not anything, please mute it, clog it, so that we do not hear it. Amen. All right. Spring and summer, 1952. April 15th. Pardon me. Really quickly. I did not have yogurt this morning. No indigestion. TMI, sorry. Just was giving an update, though, on where we left off yesterday. No nausea. Back to this. Spring and summer. April 15th. Behold, I am with thee in all places, whithersoever thou goest. This verse came to me with my first consciousness this morning as I woke here in a somewhat shabby, very humid hotel in Guayaquil. The noises of the street and square below woke me, and I try to realize that I am in Ecuador, the place of God's choosing for my life, I believe. Oh, good. I said that she gives a pronunciation later on. I did say the name right. Anyway, this was the same Ecuadorian port city, pronounced Guayaquil, where my father had docked not quite 2 months earlier. He wished he could have been there to greet her, but the undeclared nature of the relationship called for not overdoing his level of interest in a certain young missionary arriving from America. There was talk of it, on the quiet, of course, he said in his letter of April 9th. But you will know soon enough that nothing is kept that way here. Ruth, Stam, Jordan said something up at the station a couple of days ago that indicated someone has already got the word around. I find Pete most understanding in the whole matter. In the long run, you and I will simply have to develop a smiling patience. You must have done so already. Oh yes, if only he knew. But just because she'd made it to Guayaquil didn't mean there was any rush to greet her. It would be a while yet, as it had been for him, before all her belongings were unloaded and cleared customs. In the 10 days she waited for the final leg of her trip to commence, she got her first taste, my goodness, which if moved around is state. She got her first taste of South America. I could scarcely believe that I was seeing the real thing, such as I'd often seen in pictures. Along with an onrush of encroaching fear. April 15th. This morning I felt the nameless depression which comes to me when alone in new circumstances. I wonder if I shall ever learn Spanish. I know, of course, that I will, God helping me. How long shall I have to stay in Guayaquil? Whether I shall have to stay in Quito? Any length of time, when I shall be able to see Jim, etc. April 18th. Had I known that I would still be in Guayaquil today, I should have been hopelessly discouraged. But each day brings hope that my gear will come through and I will be able to fly to Quito. God has been so good in providing for me to stay with friends from PBI, new GMU missionaries. It is a miserable house, but quite ritzy for Guayaquil in general. All the houses here have extremely high ceilings and are built in a narrow rectangular shape. They house dozens of children as well as roaches, scorpions, rats, lizards, mice, etc. There is a dank, damp plaster smell, and outside there is always the stench of something burning. The contrasts are most notable. Indescribable filth and squalor, nestled right up against beautiful, shiny American cars, a few very fine homes, and modern public buildings. The average streets are unpaved, 85% of them, with goats, children, skinny dogs, donkeys, mules, vultures, and rats all thrown into the melee. Oh, the filth. And many of the children wear nothing at all. The men use the lampposts and fire plugs as do the dogs, unconcerned by spectators. Women sit on doorsteps nursing their babies. Surely this is no place for a single woman. Men here do not know the meaning of the cold shoulder and ogle and whoop at me. It makes me long to get away to the jungle where at least it is not so filthy and populated. I used to have the idea that missionaries who lived in cities had it easy. Now I am very thankful God has called me to the forest work. I don't think I could stand this very long. April 21st. And still I wait. The Lord is testing the effectiveness of lessons hitherto laid before me. Just the delay when time seems to be lost would be difficult, but the prospect of seeing Jim and Kiddo makes it doubly hard. To think that every day here means one less day with him. O Lord, thou knowest. Yesterday afternoon, we went for a walk along the waterfront. How it saddens me just to see the common sights. Literally, almost every person one sees is pathetic. Such misery written on faces I've never seen before. Such rags of clothing, such utter lack of industry or desire for improvement. The street by the river is by far the most popular thoroughfare, yet by the shore were some nude men bathing and washing clothes. My whole being recoils. Okay, so listen, you guys, just as a thing for me, this is actually kind of hard for me to hear because there's a lot of judgment. But this is a shell shock. It's a culture shock for her. So we gotta take that into mind, right? Brand new experience for her. And it's 1952. Okay, my whole being recoils at such sights. Not that I am shocked in the sense of surprised or horrified, but it is a shock to my nature. I can't express just how it affects me. I kept thinking as I walked along the shore of A.C.'s poem, which ends, "When shall the goddess flee away, and India, Ecuador, walk her shore with thee?" How true it is that here, as in any mission field outside the States or Europe, one is faced with life in its primal state, life stripped of all tinsel and show, bare, ruthless reality, a veil of tears and very truth. It makes one long for the coming of the King, more than they that watch for the morning. But at least one element that had kept this veil of tears, impression so prevalent in her 1952 thinking, was finally drawing to a merciful end. She came today, stepped off an airplane, and watched her feet walk down the steps, looked up at friends and frowned a little. The sun was brighter than the plane. That made her frown, that and the not seeing me among the friends. She hesitated, wondering which side the fence to walk up toward the building where I was waiting, watching her, and then she saw me, came straight on, and stepped up and stood before me, wondering what would I do. I took her hand, smiled, and said, "Sure good to see you." So it was, and so it is, now that she has come. That's a cute poem. Hard to say it any more dramatically, I think, than how my father's poem captured their reunion. My mother, in her journal, said it this way, April 28th. I arrived here on April 24th, have flown from Guayaquil in 1 hour and 20 minutes, 450 miles, via Pan American. I am at present living with a cultured Ecuadorian family, Arias by name. They are very kind and helpful, speaking Spanish constantly, of course. Yesterday I spent most of the day at HCJB, the mission's radio station. It is a remarkable place, and God has honored it abundantly. And what can I say of Jim? He is here, of course, living with Tidmarshes on the other side of town. The last 3 days have been maddening, not a moment alone with him. But this morning, after our class in homeopathy with Dr. T, we went for a little walk down into a eucalyptus grove. Jim, having prayed last week that the Lord would arrange a time for us to be alone together, this seemed ideal, and I took the great privilege to embrace. Elizabeth, he took me in his arms. He told me once more that he loved me for being willing to wait God's time for us. Jim, I could not find another woman like her who would wait without commitment indefinitely. Elizabeth, With his arm close around me, he asked if I was happy. Jim, are you happy? Elisabeth. Oh, what to say. Even at such a moment of bliss, there is the stabbing pain and dread of being separated from him even for a moment. I feel sometimes I can bear no more. Jim. Is there anything I can do to make you sure? I don't know. Elisabeth. God knows, and only God, not I, what I can bear, and he will lead us aright. Jim. It's just that it gets worse all the time. Elisabeth. We talked of marriage. Jim says it will of necessity be years before we can think of it. He believes he must give the prime of his life to the work, which means living in Shandia, T's jungle station, for at least 2 years before doing itinerant and pioneer work, pressing on to other tribes. I have asked God to give me the same steadfast assurance and peace that Jim has in this regard. I had felt it could not be more than 2 years hence before we could marry. Jim, tears, quiet sobbing. Elisabeth. Lord, do thou fulfill this thy word unto thy suffering servant. Preserve me from evil, sustain my trust in thee, and lift up my soul that I may praise thee for these my sore testings, for I do love thee and long to fulfill thy will. Surely, just being there was part of God's will, and because he had led her there so clearly, she knew his protection and care would stay with her and keep her. Whatever the difficulties and the hazardous possibilities, whatever the outcome of her and my father's relationship, God would help her and him be the missionary he wanted. Now, just to be clear, Quito was the site of their in-country training and orientation. While there, they would be taking classes, obtaining skills, practicing the language, and becoming acclimated to the culture. In time, they would narrow their focus onto the specific openings for ministry that were then available in the area, as well as those that were continuing to develop. But my mother and dad affiliated there with the same missionary organization under its general umbrella. But exactly what form their individual assignments would take was constantly in flux. The nature of pioneer work is that you don't know. The bridges and paths, though somewhat explored, are still largely untested. Primarily then, this season of theirs in Quito was one of working and waiting. Nice, though, that they could finally do most of their working and waiting in the same location. The picture, my father in Quito, I believe my mother took this picture. Yet because of this, they naturally had no idea for writing letters to one another during this time. So we lean on their journals now and following them through a compelling spring and summer that once seemed so unlikely even a year ago. I'll mostly stay out of the way and let their writing do its own describing, connecting the two whenever their separate journals recall the same event. Elisabeth, April 30th. The Lord has answered prayer and given me peace once more about Jim. He allowed us a wonderful morning yesterday. We sat on a sunny slope of a beautiful valley where we could see for miles across great fields to rugged peaks. Jim, overlooking the Valle de Guapulo. She seemed small before me, almost frail. Are you comfortable? Yes, and happy. Broad daylight. Elisabeth. Then we walked down into Guapulo, a village in the valley, late in the afternoon. It was misty and lovely. Jim. Spoke of engagement. She thinks I'm inconsistent. Lord, seeming to be self-contradictory. So often in speaking plainly of marriage and seeming to be so unsure about it all. I guess you understand, Lord. So long as I can do a work in reaching a primitive people better as a single man, I will stay single. And that brings me to the other thing we've been digging around, he added in his journal of April 30th, pondering where he felt the Lord might be sending him after his training phase was completed. The Ayukas, I see no reason now to stay single if I'm only sent to the Yumbos. Tidmarsh didn't, Cathers hasn't, but Ayukas? My God, who is sufficient for them? Indeed, they would prove another class of savage entirely. Jim, May 4th. Dorothy Jones arrived Friday, savage as in violent. Just so we're clear. Jim, May 4th. Dorothy Jones arrived Friday, and it looks like my larks of last week are over. She and my mother live together. DJ and Betty came over for breaking of bread, Sunday communion. Refreshing, and I trust pleasing to God. Worship is excellent exercise for the soul, makes a man big inside, makes him feel like he has found what he was built for, though he is conscious that he is inept. Inept. I realize in his saying this, he was referring more broadly to the shared nature of our human depravity, our brokenness as fallen people. But as the spring and summer wore on, an emergent sense of inferiority, especially in comparison to my mother, became a real issue for him, quite maddening in its intensity. This entry of May 4th, in his first real disclosure of it, you'll see him say, meaning he must have been grappling with it for some time, it. Jim. Couldn't keep my eyes off Betty. She's attractive in so many ways. I had to catch myself from breaking into a laugh of joy as we all were at Frank Cook's for supper. She knows so well how to handle herself in public. Artistic in conversation, a ready and refined laugh, and always a soft look for me. Sang with HCJB chorus over the air again, and she has a beautiful voice too. Well, do I thank God for her. She is on all counts unusual. She brought me 3 letters from Thomas, her younger brother, to read. There is something strong between them, something so like about them that they are closer than any other members of the family. They exchange Latin phrases or hymn quotes or tidbits from some author I've never read. Felt a strange envy creep over me as I realized what a place he has in her. I had to face it again. I can never be all she ought to have in a husband. Too dull-witted, too slow a reader, too poor memory. Her ability to hold tiny details in mind over years. She told me what coat I wore at St. Michael's Cemetery in 48 just yesterday. Lord, let me wake up to her in other ways what I lack in supplying that sort of thing for her. I just wasn't raised a scholiast. She will ultimately have to be satisfied with my body in exchange for what I lack in mind, and I with her mind in exchange for what used to appear to me in lack of her body. Strange how I am quite satisfied with it now, and having such boyish fears. He'd come a long way from making comments on her angular figure, or criticizing the acerbic impression given off by her posture and demeanor. My mother never forgot him saying, "You've got the brains and I've got the body." But apparently it was mostly bluff, a masking of hidden insecurity. Here, though, you might hear Kate snoring. Seeing her at a much more mature 25, spiritually, relationally, yes, physically, he was surprisingly taken aback. God was bringing them together and purging old attitudes in every new ways. Jim, May 8th. I can't get her to believe that I am really satisfied with her body. She still has me holding my first impressions stated in our former days together. Banana nose, sandpaper, skinny. I don't know how to explain or clarify the change in this, which has come since I really knew that I loved her last September 20th. All I know is that it doesn't matter if her breasts are small, or her shoulders are slight, or her nose not finely shaped, or her front teeth set apart. I don't like her anymore if they were ideal. Partly, I think, because she would not be what she is psychologically if she were anything but what she is physically. Conscious of these things, she has become realistic in her outlook on life generally, and has developed a humility through them she might not have had she been built otherwise. This much I know. We were made for each other. If I for comfort, then she for speed. Though I have not found her uncomfortable in the least. My arms are for her homing, a place to rest, shelter, shield, and strength. What having her there means to me cannot be said. God has brought her there and prepared her before he brought her. I am wholly satisfied with his doing. And yet the uncertainty about their future continued to cloud things. Marriage they knew would definitely need a wait. Though saddened, they were in full agreement that my dad couldn't afford the distraction of setting up house as he was being inserted into the jungle. But what about engagement? Why couldn't he go ahead and declare his intentions now? What would that cost him? How would it undermine or negate these reasonable convictions of his? Really quickly, the fact that he thinks that he's not smart is interesting in comparison to her, because I thought they were always kept up with each other. Back to the book. In reading scripture one day, he believed he'd found the biblical parallel that supported his view for staying uncompromisingly single. Uriah the Hittite, removed from battle by King David after the incident with Bathsheba, refused the king's appeal that he go spend time with his wife. The ark and Israel and Judah abide in tents, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are encamped in the open fields. Shall I then go into mine house to eat and drink and to lie with my wife? As thou livest, and as thy soul livest, I will not do this thing. 2 Samuel 11:11. Jim. It was not time to return to his house, though he had the right to do so and the encouragement. It was a time for battle, and Uriah was a warrior. There could be no mixing of home goodness in the business of his life. So it came to me. Marriage is not for me now. It is simply not the time. I do not say, and never did say, it's not the thing for me. With tribes unreached, which I now believe reachable only by unattached men, I will not do this thing. There, that sounded strong, biblical, unassailable. Elisabeth, May 9th. Today we walked in the streets of Quito. Jim spoke to me of his having asked God again for reasons for not being engaged. He answered him with the story of Uriah's refusal to lie with his wife and enjoy his home when there was a battle. Jim, I don't know why, but it seemed unreasonable to her, and she laughed at me. Elisabeth, Jim said, do you realize what it may cost? Speaking of the possibility of his going into work among the Ayukas. Yes, I realize what it may cost, death. And it is not as though I have not considered this possibility before. Jim. Flaring back at first, I soon lapsed into silence, and by the time we reached her bus stop downtown, I was seeing only sidewalk and my biting lip. Elisabeth. As Jim tried to explain his feelings, he broke down. Jim. And then I cried, and we walked. I couldn't understand why I was unable to explain sensibly just why it was not time for engagement. Elisabeth. He feels that if he were to become engaged, he could not take the risk he may be called upon to take. For me, this is a purely technical difference. For I don't believe it could cost any more if we were engaged than in our present status, for I love him with such utter completeness and abandon, and felt myself so one with him even now, that the prospect of his being killed is unthinkable. I cannot love him more at present, though I believe God can increase our capacity for loving. Jim. My reasons didn't hold up today, not even to me, and I am now aware that my reasons for not being engaged are hidden in the counsels of God's Spirit, the same as my reasons for loving her. It may be that there are no reasons to be given. She says it is enough to know that I don't have to summon reasons. Thanks, Lord, for a girl who not only will wait here, but be happy to wait here. Elisabeth. I need no reasons for our present state. I only need to know that we are doing the will of God, who will never fail us nor forsake us. Oh, the comfort of his words, the peace that keeps our hearts and minds through Christ Jesus, and may the grace that is all sufficient make of me a true child of the Father, loving, trusting, praising, and resting in his acceptable will. Apparently, despite their lack of total consensus, they left the matter in God's hands, contented in his will and gracious toward one another. But the more my dad thought back on this day's conversation, the more troubled he became again by that now familiar it. Jim. I learned something about Betty today. She makes me feel on the defensive in arguments. In the kindest sense of the word. She often sees clearer than I, and faster, to the end of things, and moves ruthlessly and rapidly to the state of what she sees. From her point of view, we ought to be engaged, though she is not trying to force me to it. When I couldn't explain well why we shouldn't be, and I choked up, she merely changed her attitude and went on the defensive herself, saying she understood, that she was sorry she had to say anything, that she hoped I didn't think I would have to produce reasons for staying apart. I was sorry I couldn't control myself because I feared to make her less expressive than she is in these matters. I want her answers, suggestions, outlook. No honest man could fear them. And today, I may have been too sensitive to them, so that she thinks it hurts me to hear her debate. But I swear it was not against her that I cried, rather against myself that I could not say what I know, or even against the Lord that he had left me verbally defenseless. Most surely it was not against her. I kept saying to myself of her, you're right, you're so damned right, but there's nothing for it, nothing to say, nothing to admit. I agree with you, but I somehow cannot ever make you see what I know. I thought of how my including the curse word from this last paragraph might refresh some who are burdened with trying to be perfect, though it might shock some who would never use such a word. Either way, I hope you see his genuine humanness in his natural fleshly writing, so that if you idolize my dad, you would instead give thanks and bear with his faults, as we must do, for example, when reading the lives of many characters from the Bible. Wow, he said, damn. In larger terms, I simply view, anyway, from a young age, I saw people from a human standpoint. So we're all human. Yeah. In larger terms, I simply view this whole event as tension between the flesh and the spirit. He and my mother wanted desperately to do God's will. To my dad, this meant being able to sense God's showing him exactly when he was supposed to engage her. He felt strongly that even though God would ultimately bring them together in marriage, it had to be after a length of time spent in the jungle. But to my mother, it meant an agony of waiting, trusting, trying to be quiet and content. Oh, it is agony to act unconcerned and distant when I am all but overwhelmed with tenderness toward him. When shall I be free to tell him? But thanks to their sincere, devoted hearts, God kept their days afloat with blessed and divine distractions from their inner turmoil. Elisabeth, May 15th. Yesterday was one of the outstanding days of my life. At 2:30 a.m., Bill Cathers, Rob Gill, Abdon, an Ecuadorian, Pete, and Jim came for me, and we started up Pichincha, a 15,000-foot volcano. It had been very rainy and doubtful, but as we began to climb, the moon shone out brightly. Jim nearly wept with the beauty of it. Wonderful with bets. Elisabeth. At about 11 a.m., we reached the pinnacle, a steep, jagged rock formation, quite strikingly resembling the Matterhorn. It took some pretty rugged rock climbing. At least I thought it was something, though, for Jim and Pete, who have climbed in the Northwest. It must have been tame. We came partway down the mountain together, and then Jim and I took a different route. We spent some time just resting in the warm, soft grass on the slope of the valley. Jim went to sleep. Jim feigns sleep in her arms. Elisabeth. And I drank in the incredible beauty of the vast vistas before me. Jim. And unless I am mistaken, she pressed a kiss on my cheek as I lay there, desperately trying to keep my breathing slow. At least she went through all the motions. Oh, Elisabeth. Oh, it is good to be with one who also loves God's handiwork. Jim, I'm glad you're the kind of man that likes this sort of stuff. Mountain climbing, that is. Elisabeth, that was his quote of her. Elisabeth, it was so much fun pointing out to one another all the loveliness about, from tiny, exquisite flowers to the brutal grandeur of the peaks and cliffs about us. Jim, the tranquility of being with her is indescribable, and I find it has a mellowing effect on me, makes me easier in social converse. Also, I find it sensitizes me, makes me more alert to fill situations, praying that God will make me wise enough to treat her right, love her well, and control our playing. And he deigns to do so, insofar as I can now measure it. The joy of just loving, giving and taking, waiting and holding is at peak now. True, as she notes constantly, there is a pain in it, being unable to consummate now as we are, but then there is no real love without suffering of some sort. I pity her as I see she worries over the future, loving and losing. God, let me be faithful to her, and let me live to love it, if it please, and let me live to love, if it please. Elisabeth. The Lord has given me some happy times with Jim since I last wrote. 2 afternoons up at the bodega, and one evening coming home from the station, HCJB, he got a bit Oh, I forgot how to say this word. Isn't it funny how much I read and yet my brain forgets how to say things? Sorry, and I get the tone of people when I'm reading. I don't, Pecked? I think it's Pecked. Piqued. I can't think of how to say the word right now. I apologize. He got a bit Pecked. I think it's Pecked. at my attitude about something he said. Ever so often, when I want with all my heart to take his arm or to tell him that I love him, I say something sarcastic or cutting or very offhand in order to restrain myself. This is what happened Thursday night. He reproved me for my attitude. It was only an apparent attitude, for such thing never represses my feelings toward him. And finally, in some measure, I brought myself to explain the reasons. He seemed to understand in part and almost melted me with his gentleness. Jim. Her restraint from speaking of her love to me or to anyone is a hard thing for her, and I must learn to be satisfied with answer responses for now. She cannot be aggressive until engagement, she feels, and I am glad there's that restraint, for I feel more. How I thank God for her. I find he is answering my prayers for wisdom to treat her properly, not through my understanding of how far to go or just how to love her, but through her attitudes, restraints, and liberties. She is a marvel for having the right feeling for things. And after I try to figure out her feelings, I find that they are often the best reasons for doing or refraining from any given thing. I'm so glad to hear my father say that. I don't think he'd have been one bit surprised to know she maintained the same right feelings for things her whole life long. I was a living witness to it in our home, and while I know his impulses urged him to want more from her physically than she was willing to give, I treasure both of them equally for their inner commitment to purity. I can say, without any risk of overstating, much of my own decision to stay pure until marriage came from my mother's joy in telling me about their marriage, and about her and my father's determination to keep their promises to God during this time in their lives. They each ate for the other, as well as all lovers do. But as the woman, she understood well that she, even more than my dad, was the one in greater control over how much leeway they allowed themselves in touch and enticement. There's much wisdom on display here, amid much tension. Be inspired by it. This is an actual demonstration of God wanting his children's best and of his children believing, despite their passion, despite their feelings, that nothing offers any substitute. Times may be different today, but this truth is not and never will be. So with the arrival of summer came an awareness that the call of the jungle was drawing nearer for my father. Up until now, he felt liberty to allow myself luxuries in getting acquainted with the country, wanting to both learn and love everything about this place where God had called him. Intent on fulfilling his missionary calling, he knew the time was approaching when he must necessarily curtail some of these adventures. Sure, there was value in every new experience. Learning a language means meeting people in all their circumstances and trips. As long as you are with nationals, it will always contribute to the end. But he couldn't afford for his Spanish to be merely passable, not if he hoped to accomplish what he set out there to do. June 8th. Giver of the gift of tongues. I would like this. I'm going to pray it for myself. Giver of the gift of tongues, let me speak to them as they ought to be spoken to, so that they do not have to hide their real reaction with polite praise. Glad to be in a national home, at least to hear it spoken as a living thought medium, not merely as English translation. It meant, of course, striking a balance between work and love. The discipline of distance has passed into the discipline of proximity for me these days. Living right across the street, eating a meal a day together on the bus, walking, it puts me on an entirely different basis than I have ever known with her before. So far, the Lord has given a good balance, it seems to me. I don't feel like I've really abandoned my Spanish for her or any other big purposes of being in Quito. I've had to keep myself from staying out too late and from going out too often, and love never gets full to the point of satiation, although at times I have the sense of having had just enough for now. June 15th. Still, we haven't kissed. I can't believe it sometimes, but it's so. Who ever heard of people in love, like we are in love, sporting as fondly as we do, and as often, who have never met at the lips? Can it really be there? We'll be more thrilled than now? Yes, but life cannot be all love, as my mother said, and events were coming together on the ground that directly influenced their subsequent missions tasks, as my father recorded in this journal entry. June 23rd. Wycliffe Bible translators made public the news of the recently signed contract with the government to enter tribes in Ecuador and reduce their language to writing. This will bring changes in our plans for the Oriente, eastern region of the country. Especially does it seem to affect Betty. Where will you send her now, Lord? Meanwhile, he was venturing out on some reconnaissance excursions. July 2nd. Buzzed shells, deserted field at Ayu. Shell Mira headquarters of Mission Aviation Fellowship. Made inquiries about Quechua population in the Canelos region. Estimates uncertain. Would guess 1,000 to 1,500. Saw the necessity for our being single to reach these people, too scattered to reach with the mission station method. Through experiences like these, he was learning to experience God in new, unexpected, invigorating ways. July 11th. You guys, we're not finishing. I'm a liar. We're not finishing. Why is it so long? Don't get me wrong. I'm enjoying reading it. How long do we get to autumn? Okay, we're going to stop at autumn because this is going way too long. July 11th. I wonder sometimes if it is right to be so happy. Day follows day in an essay session of, day follows day in an easy succession of wonders and joys. Simple, good things like food well prepared, or play with the children, or conversation with Pete, or supply of money for rent, and board within hours of its time to be paid. Grace upon grace in the outside sphere of living. But simply because I am not really studying the English Bible, fresh truth for inner soul refreshment is rare. I was reading my diary notes of 1949 and noting the contrasting soul soreness of those days with the freedom and joy of these. Those were certainly more productive from a point of view of getting things from the Word. These are more casual and less fruitful, but for reasons. Spanish must be gotten. I want badly for God to speak as he did then, but I want him to begin speaking in Spanish, and I am not yet used to that, perhaps not ready for it. How well I see now that he is wanting to do something in me. So many missionaries, intent on doing something, forget that his main work is making something of them, not just doing a work by their stiff and misunderstanding fingers. Teach me, Lord Jesus, to live simply and love purely, like a child, and to know that you are unchanged in your attitudes and actions toward me. Give me not to be hungering for the strange, rare, and peculiar, when the common, ordinary, and regular, rightly taken, will suffice to feed and satisfy the soul. Bring the struggle when I need it. Take away the ease at your pleasure. And my mother, though journaling only seldom throughout the summer, found both her love for the field and her love for my father growing steadily. July 20th. For some reason, I've not felt like writing in my journal, but there is so much I could have said. It has been a month in which God has helped me wonderfully with the study of Spanish, and also one in which I've grown to love Jim more than ever before. We have many perfect times together in the fields, through the eucalyptus groves, and on Quieto's lovely hillsides. One day, we set out at 3 a.m. and climbed Pinchincha a second time. Jim had been sick at his stomach just a few hours before we left, so he was very weak, and we could not go far without resting. It was very cold. Frost coated the grass in solid white, and the moon shone full over the lighted snow caps on the north, east, and south. It was enchanting. At dawn, the sunrise was appallingly lovely, with the fading moonlight on the other side of the valley. We were exhausted, and Jim looked so pale it almost scared me. I took turns carrying the heavy pack every hour or so. Near noon, we found ourselves skirting and half scaling a great rock wall at the head of a ravine. This really scared me, and Jim was a bit dizzy. If he had lost his balance for a second, there would have been no recovery. Then, after the strain of this piece of the journey, we had to cross a great field of volcanic ash and sand. When we finally reached the valley by which we were going home, we found it a quagmire of mineral springs, into which we sank over our shoe tops. Yep. Discovering at last a patch of dry grass, we flopped down and fell immediately asleep for an hour. Then we followed a long, long trail which dropped very gradually, and at 7:30 arrived in Quito. Other pleasant times have included reading poetry together, exploring sections of the city and surrounding country with which we were not familiar, and just short walks to be together. In love in Quito is what it says. But time for such enjoyments was drawing short. The prospect of parting within a few weeks, not knowing when or if they'd ever been this close again, began to wear on both of them. Jim. Since great moving of heart, wanting to be fair to her, wanting to marry her, wanting, but now I feel no guiding from God, not even for engagement. The years weigh on me often, awake and going off to sleep, thinking of the length of a year, worrying over the real view I should take on engagement, feeling my previous arguments fall one by one. We talk of it freely together, she and I, and my reasoning must be making it worse, but I know, reason or not, now is not the time. The acceptance of that as the will of the Father is no gladdening thing, not that my wants for her, for the work of God, perhaps among the Ayukas, conflict. They are not contradictory, but they do not seem to mesh. They have come at the same time, so that instead of fitting into one another, as cogs would, they grind against one another sometimes with awful concentration. It is too soon for me, not having seen the Oriente, to believe that God may not want me there entirely unattached. But all the while I'm mad for her, wanting to be with her night and day, the haunting hunger of body, the loneliness of mind making book study a farce at times, and making life itself seem useless without her. Elisabeth, this morning I feel overwhelmed once again with the thought of Jim's going. This time next week, he will have left. If things go as planned, time is slipping away and we have no time to be together. Saturday and Sunday, he was sick and we could not go out. Monday, we went to Alangasi, and hence were with the others nearly all the time. Tuesday, I had hoped to be with him in the afternoon, but instead he went home after lunch and studied. At 4 o'clock, when I thought surely we would go for the mail together, he came over and said that he and Pete were going down to the Tidmarshes. So I hoped for the evening. He had not come to call for his mail when I went into supper. Good. He would have to come in the evening, and then perhaps he'd stay a little while. No. In the middle of supper, he appeared to get his mail, so the evening was spent alone. Oh, sometimes I feel I simply cannot stand it any longer, this present setup of love and intimacy, about thinking with one mind, and yet the great chasm of not being engaged, the strain when I long in utter anguish to tell him how I love him and cannot. Jim. She noticed today, as she did not on the 25th, the spirit of heaviness that comes over me. I told her that I felt weepy, sighful, and that I couldn't tell her why now, but that I would later, when she could do something about it. Also that it concerned things about her that I didn't want changed, and that I would get over it. Not very clear. It isn't to me either. I don't understand what there is about loving her that makes me such a damned woman. 1952. I can hardly begin to describe it. I only know that I feel it strong and that I can't talk of it without twists coming to my mouth. Lips get dry and tears seem to brim in my eyes, and there is a crushing sense in my chest. At the bottom of it is a tremendous weight of sheer unworthiness. I don't feel fit to be in her company. I can't think of things to say if she doesn't really readily come back in conversation. I know it wouldn't help to talk to her, but I know it would help to talk to her, but can't bear to think of speaking of this thing in daylight when she could see me cry. She wouldn't believe me anyhow. I don't give the impression of feeling underdog, and I don't usually display any humility that would suggest I felt myself the lesser. Elisabeth, this separation now, for example, when I am here in my room sobbing because I cannot keep from it, sobbing for love of him and praying only, thy will be done, while he is laughing and cracking jokes with Sanchez and Pete. Oh, if he knew, but he cannot know, and I cannot tell him. There is no one to talk to. Oh, Lord, forgive me, give me grace, patience, unselfishness. My gosh, just talk. Okay, Jim. Oh, if only she felt that she could tell me she loved me and why. Perhaps that would bolster me somehow. If only she could come to me instead of my having always to go to her, letting her control, having to follow so many times when I feel that I should be leading. But what is to be done? She simply can't do otherwise until engagement. Says it just has to be that way now. My God, what a vise I'm in. And just as the pressure was feeling its most acute, news arrived that, while good, acquired a stiff upper lip of surrender. Jim. She had word the 6th that Jeannie was engaged to Bud de Vries on Sunday. Elisabeth. I am stunned, but oh, so happy for her, my little sister, 7 years my junior. Jim. Crying when I came over to ask her for a walk in the evening. Is Jenny engaged? Yes. And the 2 letters from Dave about his new is Jenny engaged? Yes. And 2 letters from Dave about his new baby. Long pauses. It's just that I can't see why they should have it so, and we have it this way. Thursday was not much better for her, but we went downtown together, took a taxi up the Benecil, a prominent hill in Quito, and walked down. She was much freer to chat, her very touch filling me with tenderness. We played in the grass down below the house, and she taught me to two-step in the street after midnight. But in the dark of the next Friday morning, he was gone, August 17th. I walked over to your wall and stalked the length of it while Pete checked the room for the last time, almost called your name to your dark windows, thinking you might be awake. Then I dropped into silence, knowing I was leaving you and ending the happiest weeks of my life, sorrowing a little in the silence. This was the first of many letters that would begin sailing again between them, but only to his journal did he commit the thoughts that had run through his mind as he lay in bed the night before, his final time of being just across the street from her in Kyoto. Slept restlessly with recurrences of last night as she knelt over me in the field. I told her that I had gotten liberty to hope for engagement in less than a year. She said, "That's good to know. Feel more and more that my reasons against engagement do not carry the weight of those in favor of it. It will mean years of promised life, likely, and that involves some problems, but they do not compare with what I am assigning Betty to in this uncommitted period, with her great reserves and pressures. For us both, I believe engagement would be a release for easier thinking, but both present and for the future. Thinking now of asking Ed to bring a ring." All right. We're going to leave off on autumn, but then we're almost at the end of the book, right? Again, I'm enjoying reading it. It's just, it's a lot. It's a beautiful story. I'm glad she shared it. I love you. Have a good day, night, evening. I will see you for lunch between 11 and 12 Central Standard Time. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Thank you, 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 thank you. Thank you. These are long, and I'm aware, so thank you so much for your time and attention. Also, there's a better thing about, like, just, I think, as you get older and maturing, because just freaking talk. Communicate. Anyway, love you. Bye-bye. See you later.